Hi guys, Angelfish Keeper here, and today I'm just going to talk about the things you actually need and the things that are optional when setting up a reef tank or fish only saltwater tank, whichever you decide to go for. So the first thing you need, surprisingly actually even before you get the tank, even before you even consider buying a tank, the first thing you're going to need is knowledge. It's really important that you understand how a reef system works, and it's really important that you understand the nitrogen cycle, which is the conversion of ammonia into nitrite into nitrate, which is what we keep down by doing our water changes in the system, which is even more important in a marine system than it is a tropical. But if you're coming to this from tropical, it is going to be a bit easier for you. Best ways to get your information is, I would say, other reefers, because they'll be able to tell you all the mistakes that you're going to make, and they can prevent you, hopefully, from actually making them. Or if you have already made them, they can show you how to put it right. So that's actually the first thing. Another ways of getting information is obviously through your local fish shop. Books is another good one. But obviously what you've got to remember when you read a book is, if you read a fish is really peaceful, you buy that fish and it turns out to be aggressive, you've got to remember that that fish hasn't read the same book that you have, so it doesn't know how it's meant to behave. So the best ways is other reefers and your local fish shop. Avoid forums if you can. Forums are really good if you want to pick up a deal on, like, maybe someone's breaking a tank down and they're selling off all the coral and the tank and the setup and everything, and you could probably buy that. But as advice, I would kind of stay away from it, only because most people that actually will comment on people asking for advice are just keyboard warriors. So basically they've just googled it and they've basically just tried to slam this person that's asking for help. Generally, these people don't know as much as they think they actually know. And it's the people that do actually know what they're talking about that stay silent, because they don't want to get into these back and forth battles where the other person's just questioning what they know. The second thing obviously you're going to be looking at is the tank. For marine systems, you've got all sorts of tanks. The most common ones is like the all-in-ones, which actually have, this one doesn't, but they've got the filters built into the back. So there would be like a black grid going across here, and all the filtration's done in the back, and you get your heater in there and your protein skimmer and all that kind of stuff, or your filter media. And they're usually the best for beginners, because you can get large ones, but mainly they're quite small nano tanks, nice and compact. They're easy to break down if they need to be moved. You've also got tanks like this one, which is rimless, which are usually nicer for marine tanks, rather than like using a tank like that or like that. You usually use a rimless tank for a marine tank, but those others will do. And obviously another one is sumps. Now, sumps can be a bit daunting for some people who have never kept a sump system, because the thing is with a sump is, whenever the power cuts off, the water drains into the sump and the sump fills up. So what actually happens is, when you get evaporation in your tank, your water level doesn't change in the tank, it changes in the sump. So if you forget to top up for evaporation, you're going to get really big salinity swings, and that's not great. So for people who kind of want to keep their filtration hidden but don't want a sump, go for an all-in-one, because it basically is a sump. It's just built into the back of the tank instead of underneath it. You can also run internal and canister filters on a marine tank, like I'm doing here. It's turned off because I'm actually doing a water change at the moment. I'm just mixing my water there, so I thought I'd do this video quickly. And obviously you've got second-hand breakdowns and stuff like that. People tearing down the tanks. You've also got that as an option, which is usually a little bit cheaper than buying a brand new system, if budget's one of your things. Another really important thing that you're going to need is flow within the aquarium. If your tank's quite small, normally the pump from the filter will give it enough flow, but if not, you will need the addition of a power head, and there's all kinds of makes. It just depends which one's going to suit your needs. You can get them on a pulse, which means they'll turn on and off and create waves. You can get some that will move left to right on a motion. They can have a spinning nozzle, which will just direct the flow in different directions, so it's not just one constant direction and your corals aren't just flowing in one direction. They're kind of bouncing around in different directions, which is what your coral need. The most important thing I would say is the lighting. You know, especially if you're going for coral. If you're just going to have fish, lighting's not really that important. But as soon as you go into corals, your light's the one thing I wouldn't skimp on. Now, Kessel, which is this here, this brand here, it's a Kessel A80. You've also got AI Primes. These two brands are probably the cheapest of the high-end lights. You know, you've got lights that will cost £6, £7, even up to £1,000, but they're not necessarily better than, say, this light, which was under £150. You know, just because it costs more doesn't mean it's a better product. You know, it's just got a lot, they've usually just got a lot more features. Like with this one, it's just got 2 twists for the colour, and that allows you to change the colour spectrum. Whereas most lights are Wi-Fi controlled, and they've got all sorts of different programs that you can dial up on them, but that puts the price of the light up. But it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, that it's a better light. Mainly those lights are for aesthetics. You know, they're not, I mean, it is going to help your coral, but it's not necessarily just for coral growth. It is so it looks nice to your eyes. Whereas a lot of people still use T5s and metal halide lights. They're going to cost a lot more to run, but you generally get a lot better growth than you do on LEDs. Because the LEDs don't really produce a lot of heat, because they're usually fan driven. Now your next thing is obviously your sand and your rock. Is it better to go for live or dry? There's pros and cons to both. I like to mix the two, so I actually went for live and dead rock. Just be careful, inspect the pieces of live rock you get and make sure there's no nasty beasts on them before you get them. And I've got some Aptasia X already there, just in case I do happen to get an outbreak of Aptasia or common glass anemones. And obviously, your live or dry sand, doesn't really matter either way. If you go for all dry, it will become live over time. It just takes time. You'll be looking at about a month to 2 months before things start to grow. Whereas with live rock and live sand, it's kind of already boosting your cycle, and you can get off your cycle straight away, and your tank will cycle a lot quicker. Next thing is test kits. Test kits are really important in marine tanks, because it's not just your ammonia, nitrite and nitrate that you've got to worry about. Obviously you've got your pH, but then you've got calcium, magnesium, alkalinity, phosphates. If you're dosing those kind of things, obviously if you're not dosing them, you don't really need to test them. But if you've got coral, you should be dosing. And then obviously if you're coming from the tropical world, you should already have a test kit. If you've got the API Master Tropical Test Kit, that is actually fine to use on a marine tank as well. The ammonia, the nitrite and the nitrate are exactly the same. It's just the pH that's different. Instead of using the normal pH, you want to use the high range pH. And the last thing that you actually need when setting up a marine tank is something to test your salinity. So I've got just there is a refractometer. So what it is this thing here. This one has like an LED light on it. I don't think you're going to be able to really see through that now. But basically you just put your salt water on that little lens there, flip the lid over, look through there, and your salt wants to be about 1.026. You'll see a load of numbers and a clearly defined blue line. And that's a refractometer. They are very accurate. And then you've got a thing called a hydrometer, which you just dip into your water, and it's got like a swing needle, and it'll give you a bunch of numbers that are in green, and it's kind of, as long as you're within that green area, you're okay. But your refractometer is going to tell you exactly what it is. You want to recalibrate it about once every week. Just get some fresh water, use the little screwdriver that comes with it, and put the blue line back dead on 0. And that's how you calibrate your refractometers. One thing that is going to be necessary, but not unless you've got coral, is your coral supplements here. So you've got calcium, magnesium and alkalinity. They're the 3 main ones that your corals are going to consume. In a smaller tank, a water change is normally sufficient to put these back into the water. But obviously, depending on the amount of coral that you've got, the size of your tank, supplements are usually the best. I like to add them anyway, even though this tank isn't huge and I don't have a lot of coral in there. I still like to add my supplements because then I know they're going in. You know, you can't really guarantee it by doing a water change. You can when you're physically adding it. But obviously, you only need to dose those if you've got coral. If you haven't got coral, you don't need to worry about dosing. Now we're going to get onto the additional things. So these things aren't necessary. They're just nice to have, and they are going to make the hobby a little bit easier for you. The first thing is this thing here, and it's called a protein skimmer. So basically it does exactly what it says. It takes the organics and proteins out of the water by creating a foam, and basically all the muck sticks to that foam and it bubbles up into this cup and it bubbles over, basically taking it out of your tank completely. Not like a filter where it's still sitting in the aquarium until you take it out. That is physically taking it out. Until then you just take that cup off, wash it under your tap, and then put it back on. Not necessary, because what you can actually do is put twice the amount of recommended rock into the aquarium, and the rock will actually act as a protein skimmer. But then again, it is still sitting in your aquarium, and it will make your phosphates and nitrates go high, so you will want to keep an eye on those. Another additional thing is reactors, like calcium reactors, phosphate reactors, stuff like that. Things that you have to put carbon in, and like ROFOS, stuff like that. As long as you keep on top of your maintenance, your water changes and stuff like that, you'll not need a reactor. A reactor is normally when you've got a phosphate problem, you'd put a reactor on. But what I do is I just put some Phosguard or ChemiPure into my filter, and that'll take care of it. You don't need to buy a £100 reactor or however much it's going to cost. Another thing that, if you're on a budget, it might kill your budget because these are quite expensive, but if you're not very consistent with your topping up, you're probably going to want one of these. It's an automatic top-up system, and it basically does what it says on the tin. So you would have like your RO reservoir, which could be a spare tank or anything like that, or like a drum like this with your RO water, because when you're topping up for evaporation, you don't add salt water back into the tank because the salt doesn't leave the aquarium. So as soon as the water level rises, so does your salt level. So you want to put RO back in, which is just fresh water, back in, and that will keep your salt level at the desired level. Because once your salt level rises, your alkalinity, your magnesium and your calcium all swing with it, and you don't really want that in your reef tank. Another one that is optional is an RO unit. You can get these in 2, 3 and 4 stages. They're basically just water filters, which basically filter everything out your water. It doesn't even have a pH, no total dissolved solids or anything like that. Because obviously with a marine tank, ideally you want to avoid using tap water, especially if you're going to put coral in. Normally with your hardier fish like your clowns, damsels, chromis, stuff like that, the chlorinated tap water will be okay. But obviously with all the metals, heavy metals and the high nutrients in tap water, you'll get a lot of algae problems. Another optional thing, you could also, before I go on to the next thing, you could also just go to your, if you're new to the hobby and you've never had experience with mixing your own salt, you could just go to your local fish shop and you can buy the pre-mixed salt. You can buy the RO there if you wanted to, so you don't have to worry about that. The work's taken out of it for you until you get the knowledge and experience to start mixing the water yourself. You just buy a tub of salt, buy some RO water and mix it yourself. The next thing would be automatic dosing pumps. So obviously, as you can see here, I'm just dosing all my trace elements manually, which means I'm measuring them out and just dumping them in the tank. An automatic dosing pump would basically be, a pump would do it for you, however many times a day you wanted it to dose and how much. And that basically, say you go a day and you forget to dose, say, calcium. If your corals, especially like your hard corals with the skeletons, if they absorb all that calcium, you know, it's important that you keep on top of it and keep replenishing it. Because your coral is basically like plants in an aquarium. Say a few polyps on your coral aren't doing very well, the rest of the colony is going to put energy into helping those polyps, and they're not going to put their energy into new growth. Same with plants. When the damaged leaves, your plant puts more energy into repairing the leaf than it does in actually growing the plant. So you just want to cut those off if you can. Obviously coral, it doesn't matter when you knock heads off and stuff like that, because it just regrows. And the last thing on the optional is a chiller. And this basically isn't going to be applied to everybody. This is going to be applied more to the people that live in hotter parts of the world that keep marine, like Australia, stuff like that. And a chiller is basically like a canister filter, but instead of like heating the aquarium, it chills it. So it just your water swirls around inside of it and it puts the water back into your tank cold. And they're all your optional things for a marine, so you don't need those things, but they'll make it a hell of a lot easier for you. I think the only thing I've actually got on there of the optional stuff is a skimmer, just, you know, because it does keep your tank a lot cleaner. You don't have to buy a big expensive one. I've just got a hang on the back one there, which works just fine. It takes a lot of muck out the water. So yeah, that was just an in-depth video of things that you actually need for an aquarium, a saltwater aquarium, as opposed to things that are optional, that a lot of people say that you need when you don't. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe.